In accordance with California Senate Bill 361, this meeting is not physically open to the public. Commissioners and staff are meeting via Zoom, and there are several ways for the public to watch and participate. Information on how to join the meeting using the Zoom application or landline or mobile phone, along with how to submit public comment during the meeting tonight, is available on our website, cityofcapitola.org, and on the published meeting agenda. As always, this meeting is cablecast live on Charter Communications Cable TV Channel 8 in the city of Capitola and on Channel 25 throughout Santa Cruz County. The meeting is being recorded to be rebroadcast on the following Monday and Friday at 1 p.m. Meetings can also be streamed live on YouTube or on the city's website. Our technician tonight is Olivia Philly. And with that, why don't we go ahead with the roll call? Louis?
Yes, please. Commissioner Christensen?
Here.
Hello?
Hi, here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear
Yes.
you now.
Okay.
Commissioner Newman?
Here.
Commissioner Westman?
Here.
Commissioner Root?
Here.
Chair Wilk?
Here. Let's move on then to oral communications. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Planning commissioners, there are no deletions to the agenda. However, we did receive some public comment, one on 106 Cliff and the other on the Prospect Ave application. And I want to just check in, did you all receive those and have time to review those public comments?
Yes, that was the 2 emails.
The 2 emails.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Okay, let's move on then to public comments. This is an opportunity for the public to weigh in on any item that is not on the agenda or make any announcements to their choosing. They have 3 minutes to do so. Katie, are there any members who want to raise their hand or submit an email?
So I do not see any emails for public comment. And now I am checking the Zoom and there are no hands raised from the Zoom. So no public comment.
Okay, very good. Let's move on then to commission comments. Are there any commission comments on items not on the agenda?
No.
Very good. Let's move on then to staff comments. Same question.
No staff comments this evening.
Okay, next item is the consent calendar. These are items that are to be brought forward before the committee and voted as a single item. There is only one item on the consent calendar, 1835 48th Avenue. Does anybody wish to pull this item? If not, or make comment on it. If not, I'm willing to hear a motion for approval of the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar. This is Commissioner Westman.
I'll second. Commissioner.
We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Westman and a second by Commissioner Christensen. Without any further comment, Louis, could we have a roll call vote?
Sure. Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Newman?
Aye.
Commissioner Ruth?
Aye.
Commissioner Westman?
Aye.
Chair Wilk?
Aye. Consent calendar passes. We'll now move on to public hearings. These are intended to make the public have an opportunity for public discussion of each of the items. We'll follow the following procedure: staff presentation, followed by planning commission questions, followed by public comment, followed by deliberation, and finally decision. Item 1 on the public hearing agenda is 1820 41st Avenue, Suite A. Staff, do we have a presentation?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Wilk. I will be delivering the staff presentation here, sharing my screen. So this application is for a conditional use permit modification submitted by BevMo. shopping center is the Capitola Station. And specifically, Bevmo is adjusting a bit of their business model and the way they operate with regard to delivery from the store to customers and associated hours of operation of the delivery. A little bit of, well, first I'll just talk, I'll frame their proposal. So right now, this type of a service is not offered in-house, only by third-party app and online based. So they're looking to bring this delivery of their products in-house. And they are expanding a little bit of their inventory percentage to sell more non-alcohol related products. And they're proposing alcohol delivery, basically all hours not prohibited by state law, and delivery of non-alcohol products 24 hours a day. The existing use permit is in good standing, never had any code enforcement action, so Bevmo is in good standing. It was established in 2008. There's some language in both the staff report and conditions to regulate hours, and then delivery to store. Behind the store, there's a residential proximity, but there was not any discussion of delivery from store to customers. So we needed to address that with this proposal. So our analysis, we worked side by side with the police department. We kind of did a sweep of other jurisdictions in the county, as well as looked at what other app-based personal shopping services are available. And then also just available online information of hours of both liquor store and convenience stores. What we found is, other than maybe a handful of pre-existing, long-standing liquor stores and convenience stores in Santa Cruz, by and large, either market-driven or regulated, these stores close between 10 p.m. and midnight. And so in looking at this delivery, we didn't want to go so far as to create a new precedent. And so with a recommendation tonight, we are recommending that they stop the alcohol delivery at midnight while the other delivery could continue. So specifically, this is just paraphrasing some of the conditions. So stopping at midnight, we had to amend a couple of the conditions to differentiate of delivery to store from warehouse or other versus to store or from store to customers. So there's some minor modifications to language there. And then we want to not introduce a new impact to the adjacent residential neighborhood. So we're asking that they stage out of the front door after regular business hours. So there'd be a 9 p.m. cutoff for these delivery drivers to load and stage from the front door. And then we're also recommending a 1-year follow-up. So it'd be just a simple return trip to the Planning Commission to report out any issues that had come up in the 1 year. So with all of that, we are recommending approval with the conditions as discussed. And I will just note the applicant is not intending to make a presentation, but they are on standby for any questions. So I'm available for questions as well.
Is the police department available for questions? I have a question on their report.
I don't think they had availability this evening, unless that changed last minute, Katie.
Yeah, our captain who's been working on this is on vacation this week, but we met with her several times and we're prepared to answer questions for them, hopefully.
Okay, well, I'll wait until discussion then. We can discuss it as a group. Are there any other questions of the presentation by any of the commissioners?
I had a quick question. This is
Courtney.
Commissioner Christensen. I'm wondering what you guys said that it was a study of the deliveries that are available till midnight. Is that, I mean, could you get an Uber Eats to deliver, you know, a couple bottles of wine after midnight from Safeway? Was that kind of the comparison, or is it more of, you know, the gas stations and liquor stores are closed? Is that more of the comparison?
Yeah, I think what we looked at was just just from a market standpoint, how late are stores that are selling liquor open?
Mhm.
And both from the regulatory side and just what are posted hours of operation. And so what we found was, yes, you can get a personal shopper to go shop for you, but only to stores that are open. So I think that's why we're making the difference between the non-alcohol related products. So we want them to be competitive
Mhm.
and allowed to compete with the market for that delivery. And then the other was, the other side of the coin is, we don't want to create a new precedent with this, allowing this business to operate past midnight selling liquor, where we didn't find any others in Capitola. Watsonville just doesn't allow it. Santa Cruz has an ordinance that requires a city council approval, and the staff person we talked to said nobody had actually pursued that. They all just decide to stop business at midnight. So a little bit more details of what we went through to come to this conclusion, but it's a combination of both regulatory and what we just see out there as posted information.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious.
Any other questions from the commissioners? If not, let's move on to public comment. Do we have any, well, you mentioned that the applicant is available but doesn't wish to make a presentation. Are there any other public comments on Zoom or email?
I am not seeing any hands raised on Zoom. And our public comment email, there have been no messages received.
All right, then let's move on to Planning Commission deliberations. Anybody wish to weigh in on this topic? If no one else does, I do have a question, and this is what I kind of wanted to discuss with the police captain. And the thought is, so in Santa Cruz, there's the nearest 7-Eleven. They sell beer and alcohol and wine 24/7, right? So they're open 24 hours a day. So I or someone wanted to go out and get liquor between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m. There's a good chance that the party had already been started and now they just need to resupply. So that would create the risk of a DUI. So now all of a sudden you have someone driving to Santa Cruz just across town to pick up more liquor, and now we've got a traffic hazard. So to me, the notion of that person staying home and getting their alcohol delivered to them is safer than not. So that I kind of wanted the police to weigh in on that. Did you ask them that question by any chance, Katie?
We did. The flip side to that is that if liquor were to be delivered to a home having a house party between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m., it felt like they could also be contributing to an issue of people driving home after getting more alcohol delivered to a party between those hours. So really after midnight, the access is to, as you stated, the 7-Elevens, and there are those drivers available that you can order a personal shopper to go by to order beer or wine, and it would be delivered to your homes. There aren't many liquor establishments that are open past midnight, and however, several bars in Capitola will stay open till 2 a.m., but not many. So they felt like the risk was higher by allowing more alcohol to be delivered to parties after midnight than if somebody wanted to order beer or wine, they could do so through the local 7-Eleven using an Instacart or other service like that. So they really were they don't want to, they didn't really want to add to they create a service that hasn't been established in the county. And as we did the research, as Brian did the research, looking at our neighboring jurisdictions, there really isn't this service available for hard alcohol after midnight. And so they thought it was reasonable to just stop delivery of alcohol at midnight to be kind of consistent with what is out there at this time.
Thank you. That's a very thorough answer. Is there any other discussion on this issue?
Well, I did have a comment.
Go ahead, Commissioner Newman.
So the only question I had is I'm really not sure what the effect of a 1-year check-in on the conditional use permit is. The commission, as I understand it, we don't have any power once a conditional use permit is issued to modify it. So I guess we could refer it to for enforcement if we thought that there were violations going on. But other than that, I don't see what the point of it is. Maybe there's something I'm misunderstanding about that. If we're just a 1-year conditional use permit and then it was up for renewal, that would be a different story.
Brian, would you like me to respond to that?
Sure, go ahead.
So this has been a practice we've used for whenever a newer application comes in where we haven't had delivery of alcohol in the past. We have, with our food trucks, we recently did a 1-year check-in and it was successful. But I do think, I don't have the condition in front of me, but we could, on the conditions, state that conditions could be modified depending if there's new impacts realized over the year. So
Well, I think that would be a good idea to, so the applicant was aware of that 1 year, that there was some teeth in it.
Okay, Commissioner Westman has her hand up.
Yeah, I had my hand up, but I think Katie did a good job. I do believe that we can have a review of a use permit and add additional conditions as long as we put it in the use permit that it will be reviewed and there's a possibility of additional conditions at that 1-year review. So, but Katie took care of that. So for me, I really don't have any problems with this if we stick with the midnight timeframe. I think that makes a whole lot of sense, and it's hard for me to believe that BevMo is going to succeed or fail on the amount of liquor that they sell between midnight and 2 o'clock that it's going to be delivered to people's homes. So I would be willing to make a motion to approve the application with the conditions, adding the comment about that there could be additional conditions at the 1-year review period on the conditional use permit, and staying with the midnight delivery number.
Okay, I'll second the motion with those amendments.
We have a motion by Commissioner Westman and a second by Commissioner Ruth. Is there any further discussion on this? If not, okay, let's take a vote. Could we have a roll call, please, Louis?
Sure. Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruth,
Aye.
Commissioner Westman,
Aye.
Chair Wilk.
Aye. Sometimes I want to say no just to get my point across, but it's unanimous. Okay, we are able to move on then to item B, which is 106 Cliff Avenue. Do we have a staff presentation?
Yes, one moment. Can everybody see that?
Not yet.
Not yet. There it is.
All right. Good evening, commissioners. The application before you is for 106 Cliff Avenue. The application includes a design permit, historic alteration permit, coastal development permit, and variance request to a historic three-story single-family residence at 106 Cliff Avenue, as I mentioned. The site, as shown here, the property is located in the Depot Hill neighborhood, surrounded by a variety of historic properties, first, second, and three-story structures along the Cliff Avenue street facing the Capitol Village. The application is including 673 square feet of additions and modifications to the primary dwelling unit, and for the demolition of 2 non-historic structures located along the rear property line, and to construct a new accessory structure that includes an accessory dwelling unit and a 2-car garage. The new ADU is 698 square feet, and the detached garage is 457 square feet. Just to be clear, these are detached from the primary dwelling unit, which is why we refer to them as detached, but they are themselves attached to each other. That is any clearer. This is the proposed site plan. All parking is located in the rear, in and in front of the detached garage. The colored circles indicate the existing, proposed, and proposed removal trees. The 2 green towards the side of the structure would be new. The 4 trees being proposed for removal are in orange towards the rear of the property, and the blue represents the large coast redwood, which is proposed for preservation. The applicant did include a arborist report by Nigel Belton supporting those removals on the basis of either the condition of the trees, the proposed development, or both. Now on to the elevations. I've done side by side, so it should be easy if we need to refer back to them. So this is the existing and proposed front, excuse me. The blue area indicates the new massing. And this is the most publicly visible elevation. Most of the additions are located on the side and the rear of the structure. And within the existing roof line, there is a new stepped gable in the front and a cross gable to the side. The design will also recreate the original front covered porch, which was converted to conditioned space in the late 1900s. This is the existing and proposed south side elevation. The existing and proposed north side elevations. Most of the massing, as you can see, is actually focused on this elevation and towards the rear of the structure, partially obscured by existing roof lines. And this is the proposed rear elevations, existing and proposed. A new second-story deck is also proposed in the rear, accessible from within the residence and by an external spiral staircase. This is the 3rd story. The structure includes a unique 3rd story with 3 spaces of varying ceiling heights. The entire turret space and a portion of the central space currently exceed 4 feet in height and thus count towards the FAR calculation. In order to gain additional floor area, the applicant is proposing to reduce the ceiling heights of the forward and central spaces to less than 4 feet. The applicant referenced the above photos, noting the limited function and size of the existing spaces. This is from the side, one of the side elevations, and the areas in blue approximate the new 3rd story ceiling heights as they would be from the outside.
Ceiling heights? I mean, the 2nd story ceiling height?
That would be the 3rd story ceiling height where it says proposed. Shown above are cross sections representing new ceiling heights, which would not exceed 4 feet as shown above. During review, staff raised concerns regarding the proposal to bring down ceiling heights in order to gain floor area in other areas. Typically, the floor area exemption is utilized for remainder spaces such as below staircases and to design roof pitches and attic spaces that were not intended as condition areas to not count towards the floor area. This is the first instance that staff could find where an application proposed to lower internal ceiling heights in order to exempt existing floor area. Staff is deferring to the discretion of the Planning Commission whether lowering internal ceiling heights is an acceptable application of the code. The application includes a detached ADU, as mentioned before. The ADU is designed and proposed to be subject to the limited standards covered in our code. If this came in by itself, it would be a ministerial application, and I should say by itself and not including the garage element. But the ADU itself complies with those limited standards for a maximum size of 800 square feet, maximum height of 16 feet, and the 4-foot rear and side setbacks. It also complies with the objective standards to blend a attached or detached accessory dwelling unit on a historic site. So briefly covering some of the historic findings themselves. Early review by Mr. Bergstein, our project architectural historian, came back with some recommendations and some notes of what was considered significant on the structure. Notably, the complex roof massing, the high-pitched roofs, gable roofs, the southwest corner tower, and a lot of the cladding on the exterior and the number of the original windows that have unique sashed pattern and the V-groove siding. So following the initial staff meeting with the applicant, we gave back feedback regarding these recommendations. Mr. Bergstein subsequently reviewed the revised plans, which the applicant had adapted based on those recommendations and found them to be in compliance with the standards. I just noted some of the main points that would cover the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, being that they preserve the majority of visible windows, original windows, maintain the unique shingles and shingle patterns on the front and side elevations, recreate the covered front porch, remove the existing non-original sash windows that were added sometime when that front porch was enclosed, and locates much of the new massing to the rear and side to minimize public visibility. And he also noted that the new proposed ADU and garage structure was also in finding with the standards that it was distinct and complementary of the existing structure. So there are a couple variance requests with this application. The applicant is requesting a variance for 2 different height standards, one for the maximum height of a chimney or some sort of projection, and then for that of the actual massing itself. The blue areas again represent the new massing. The lower red lines that you see, the solid red lines, indicate a height of 27 feet. And then the dashed line above represents a height of 28 feet. Those are the maximum heights that would be applicable to this project, given that it is a historic structure. I'm going to cover that a little bit more in the next slide. That the maximum allowed height for chimneys is 28 feet, regardless of whether or not it is historic. I'm going to cover a bit of the site findings here. The structure is historic and protected within Capitola zoning code and within CEQA. The primary structure is on a sloped lot with a with steep existing roofs, which impose difficulties in designing compatible additions that also comply with the height limitations for the zone. The starred properties represent the few properties along Cliff Avenue that actually do exceed the allowable height limitations. And then the one to the top represents the only property in this area that staff could find where they had a existing chimney that also exceeded any height limitations that we allowed. And to cover some of that slide again, this is a table showing the various height limitations that apply to the R1 zone. Typically, you have a maximum height of 25 feet for the primary massing. That is actually increased to 27 feet for historic structures such as this, especially when they are trying to match it with the existing roof lines, which the applicant has done here in staff's opinion. And then for chimneys, they are allowed to exceed the base height of 25 feet by 3 feet. And the code explicitly states that that is regardless of whether or not it's a historic structure. So it's 28 feet for both historic and non-historic structures. The proposed variance would allow an increase to the massing height by 8 inches and an increase to the chimney to 41 feet instead of 28. While staff was able to make findings to support the variance for the massing on the additions, staff could not make findings for B, C, and E to support a variance for the proposed chimney. The structure does already have an existing chimney, and if they wanted to create some new heating, they could find other means or locations to do so. And again, as staff know, there's not much of a precedence for this in the area or in the zone to allow something of this stature, and that it wasn't something that enhanced the original design. The architectural historian noted that this did not appear to be an original feature, so staff didn't see that this would enhance the historic nature of it in any way.
Sorry, could I interrupt? I know this is a little bit out of
Yeah.
the norm, but number B or letter B, privileges enjoyed by other property. So do you just mention that there's other properties on Cliff Avenue that have chimneys that exceed the maximum? So isn't that justification for B? Did I miss something?
So we could cover that more at the end if you'd like, but I would say that typically when the planning department reviews variance applications in regards to whether or not it's enjoyed by other properties, we try to focus on what seems to be a trend rather than just a singular example.
All right, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. To summarize, in the staff report, staff recommended that the commission approve the project but deny the variance for the chimney. However, as brought up earlier in this presentation, staff does still have concerns about setting a precedence for floor area by lowering ceiling heights. The commission may continue the application and provide direction for modification if they have similar concerns. With that, I will hand it over to the commission for any questions and comments.
Any questions or comments by the commissioners? Let me see if there's hands raised. Any questions? Susan, Commissioner Westman raised her hand first.
Yeah, I wondered if you could show us an elevation that shows the existing chimney on the house. I don't remember seeing that.
It's, let me see if it's not actually shown on the plans. I'll see if that photo we included captures it, but I don't think it does. That's correct. One moment. Yeah, you can't see from this photo. I can put up a photo if you'd like, but the chimney only protrudes, I think, a couple feet above the roof line, and the rest of it's a metal vent.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make certain I hadn't missed it.
Very good. Commissioner Newman, you also have your hand up.
What is the proposed use of the 3 foot 11-inch height area?
I believe they saw it as being, I mean, I'd rather let the applicant specify that, but I imagine as attic space. Or do you mean the space above it?
No, I mean that space. So,
They've been referring to it as attic space, so that's my assumption.
so don't we have situations where people have attics that aren't included in their floor area ratio calculations?
That's correct. And
Storage areas that are not really livable space?
yes, that's true. And that's why I mentioned that as an explicit example of where this exemption does often apply. But usually that's in a design phase where the architect or designer would actually design roof pitches and plate heights to make sure that space did not exceed 4 feet. Or if it did, they understood that those areas would actually count towards their floor area calculation.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ruth.
Yeah, this is a question for Sean. How does the ceiling height, adjusted ceiling height affect the cupola, and how will that be utilized?
That the latter part of your question, I think it would be best deferred to the applicant. As for how it would appear, I can pan back to the image I have that superimposed the new heights, if you'd like.
Yeah, could you please?
Yes. We did ask to clarify with the architect whether or not this would have a visual impact, because it was our impression that it would drop below the top part of the window. And this is an estimation, but it does appear it would. The architect clarified that they did not believe it would have any visible appearance or alteration from the outside, but you may want them to clarify that.
So does the upper portion of the cupola then become unused space?
With windows.
That's my assumption.
And the ceiling height in the cupola is certainly more than 4 feet, correct?
I'm not sure how high that goes up, or if there's another ceiling above that, or if it extends to the top of the spire.
I thought when I was in there years ago, I thought it extended to the top of the spire.
I think there's a picture of it, isn't there? In
There
the
is.
presentation.
It does not angle up, but yes, we have a picture.
Okay.
So you can see a part of it does climb, but I don't know how high that goes.
Certainly more than 4 feet, it appears.
Any other questions, Commissioner?
Yeah. I just like some more clarification from that from the applicant.
I agree. I agree. This business with the cupola seems very weird.
Mhm.
Let's see. I'm not sure what the appropriate Robert's rules are on this. Should we, Katie, should we just get our comments to staff, or should we also include comments to the applicant at this point? Why don't we wait until public comments when the applicant is there and we can ask questions at that point?
Yes.
Does that make sense? Okay. Then Commissioner Newman, if you're done, let's move on to Commissioner Christensen. You have questions as well.
I just had a quick question for staff. I'm wondering if, since the turret is, or the cupola is original, and it could be considered a unique historical feature, it does present a challenge with their design. Is there a way to use that as the support in their variance of saying that that's a unique situation that they're having to negotiate? And maybe just this whole discussion is kind of just semantics about pushing the ceiling height down? Is that,
I can chime in there. So the planning commission could consider like within the variance, you know, we just looked, the applicant brought it in to show a decrease in floor area by dropping the ceiling height, which is something we have not seen in the past, and it meets like the definition, but it doesn't quite meet the intent in our overview. However, you are allowed to grant a variance for floor area ratio within the code. So if that were something that you'd want to consider, that is open to the planning commission.
my intuition is, it just seems really silly to try to just say that they're gonna lower the ceiling height in a existing cupola. It just doesn't sit right. I just feel like it would seem better for precedent and all the other, you know, future applicants if they were just to say, you know, we understand it's a cupola. We understand that, you know, it has a height that's greater than 4 feet, but we're allowing it because it's an existing historical architectural element, and we don't need to fool ourselves by lowering the ceiling kind of thing. But I don't know, it's just my first thought.
I'm going to read through the floor area exceptions and see if there's anything there for historic, but I think we only allow an exception for height for historic features. But Sean, correct me if you already know the answer to this.
Well, while she's doing that, let me just say, it occurs to me that there's one thing to ask for a variance on floor area ratio. It's another thing to create floor area by putting in false ceilings. It seems like anybody, a homeowner, could do that and say, okay, I'm going to cut every room in my house in half and say, okay, it's really under 4 feet. Take in the false ceiling, get approval, take out the false ceiling, boom, I'm back to. So I'm not saying this applicant would do that, but I mean, it opens the door to gaming the system for other applicants. So would have rather seen this as a request for variance to floor area ratio than to say, oh no, we're compliant because we dropped the ceiling.
That's kind of what I'm agreeing with that sentiment. I think that, but moreover is I'm understanding what the applicant is saying. He's saying that my attic space is useless. I don't really want to count that as floor area because I'd like to put a useful addition on the structure, you know, and just eliminate the attic space altogether. And okay, that's understandable. I would be perfectly fine with considering lowering those ceiling heights to meet the code and just kind of just ignore that space. But the cupola just seems like it should just be addressed in a different way. It should just be addressed in a way that says we're not lowering the ceiling or doing anything silly. We're just considering it a historical feature, and usable space, not usable space, kind of, it's a moot point, you know? But that's.
All right. I have some questions that are not actually on the cupola. I have a question on the side setback on the north side. If we can bring up that slide that shows the north side. So, yeah, is that the right picture? Where they have the overhang that was added in the 60s on the is that on the left there, existing north elevation? Go back a slide. I don't think that's the one. No, that's not it.
So this is the north, and it's the one on the left-hand side if you're looking from the front. This is where the 4 traps are on the side.
So if we're looking from the front, basically facing north, the left-hand side is where there's currently a pass-through with steps going up and then the overhang, which was added in the 60s, according to the historic reference.
So you want the west elevation?
So yes, you're right. I want the west elevation. Do I want the west elevation? Yes, the west elevation. Yes, there we go. There we go. So currently on the left side of that, you see that overhang that, correct me if I'm wrong, is why I'm asking. That overhang was added in the 60s. And then currently that's a visual sight all the way to the backyard. And they're proposing that they put a wall in the back of that overhang so that sight line disappears. And then that extension, which is already non-compliant with the 6-foot setback, then becomes like a 1 foot setback from the property line. Is that correct?
Let me just make sure I'm understanding this. So if we're looking,
Yeah, that porch. So over at the top of the screen, you see that angled lot line.
Mhm.
And then you see in the upper left-hand corner of the lot, you see the steps coming up and then onto the porch.
Yes.
So currently not shown in this picture is an overhang on that porch so that they can walk in the side door and not be rained on, which was added in the 60s, according to the report, I think. So currently, the way this is shown, you see a decent setback from the property line, 6 feet or more. But this redesign then takes the wall, which is they're going to put on the back of the porch, and extends it almost all the way to the property line, which then encloses the back portion of the overhang, which was also added in the 60s to make it further non-compliant with a 6-foot setback. My question is aren't we effectively allowing a 0 lot line exemption on this? I mean, we're basically eliminating the setback, period.
So I want to point out, and it's hard to see on this image, but we have it on the engineering plans as well as the existing conditions survey. And the architect had superimposed it here. There's a faint outline, dashed line along here that shows the existing extent of the uncovered and the covered porch areas that wraps around to the back. This line right here that's closest to the northern property line is shared with the existing porch area, which also has an existing covered porch. So the applicant has redesigned that, but is not, from our staff review on this, exacerbating that area. There's also a 2nd-story deck that wraps around, and they're maintaining the extent of that as well. As far as new, they're showing that the new massing, the additions would still meet the 1st or 2nd as applicable side setbacks.
All right, well, you've answered my question. I do have an issue with that. I can discuss it later. Are there?
Just to be clear, they are meeting the 1st and 2nd story setbacks for the new addition. And they're not exacerbating the non-conforming porch.
So that wall that they're putting on the back, what are they calling it, a fence?
So what you're seeing is, because it's 2-dimensional, when you're looking at the view from the street, you're actually seeing, I don't know if you can see you probably can't see my cursor, but if you were to stand, Sean, if you can put your cursor at the top of those stairs and you were to look straight back without looking at an angle, you would be viewing the new addition, that wall that jets out, I'm going to guess about 4 or 5 feet where Sean's pointing. That's what you're seeing from that front elevation. But in actuality, they maintain the setback from the turquoise blue property line is way out. Sean, do you know what that measurement is?
Yeah, this measurement here is about 8 feet from these points to the property line. It's about 8 feet 2 inches.
Okay, so I think you convinced me, but just let me make sure that I understand this. So that porch, that is the back of that porch, that there is not a wall that goes up and covers the 1st story that goes from the house to basically to the lot line. You're saying there is not a wall there. No. That's an illusion. What you're doing is looking through the porch and seeing the house in the back.
That's correct. If you were to stand towards the center of the lot and look back, I think you'd still be able to see towards the rear of the lot. But if you were standing over here, maybe looking straight, maybe not.
All right, that clarifies a lot. That was difficult to see from the drawings, but that's okay. Thank you. That was very helpful. Any other questions of staff? If not, we can move on to public comment.
So-
Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say the architect is here and has his hand raised for public comment.
Yeah, let's get the applicant first. Go ahead.
This is Cove Britain. Oh, Sean, I think you're going to have to.
I can, but I was going to suggest that because we do have, it looks like you might have already sent it to the commission, but we did receive a public comment that Mr. Britton may want an opportunity to respond to.
You know, I think it'd be best to allow Cove to answer the planning commissioner's questions first, and then we can move on to public comment and additional answers if necessary.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Britton, we've unmuted you there, so
Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. It's always, thank you so much. You know, it's a late evening. I have to say my youngest daughter just got an award graduating from college, but I'm still here. So that might not mean anything, but I appreciate that you're here, and I'm sure this was is a long night for you all. The ceiling height up in the attic, and I have to say I really appreciate Commissioner Christensen's comments about it, because it's a difficult situation because that space is unusable, period. And I don't want to lower the ceiling height in there. And frankly, I can barely walk into that space. So why is that space counted as square footage? Well, I understand the Capitola's ordinances regarding that, right? Because you're trying to avoid having that massing and so on. But this is a very old home, and it has conditions that are unusual. Nobody would ever put in a turret like that currently because it would count as square footage, even though it's unusable. The only thing I've ever heard that's been used by, and which I wouldn't encourage anyway, because that's just a personal preference, is some guy that used to like to sit there and play his drums. You know, it's not usable space, and it's not actually accessible in a legally way to get there. So we're willing to drop the height on it. We don't want to, but it's not usable. We're not trying to game the system. We're just like going, we're being penalized for square footage that is unusable. And if anybody was designing a new house, they wouldn't include it. And seriously, it's fine to continue this hearing to discuss that more. My client is not here and so on. But I think it's a good discussion because it's like going, what do you do with these old houses? But then again, how often do they come up? So I think this is an unusual also project because this is one of the older homes in Capitola, one of the tallest ones. And it also violates various zoning codes at this point, and building codes for that matter. So how do you deal with these, and how do you do them in a good way? And I believe my client and I have really made a great effort to do so, but I think it's not a bad discussion to have. I want to say also that I think Sean has done an exceptional job, frankly, and the presentation, which I really appreciate. I don't agree with some things. I was somewhat disturbed that we hadn't been informed that they were challenging the chimney. And I have to go to the chimney. This becomes a problem because chimneys are, for wood burning fireplaces, are as of right. Everybody in, frankly, the county of Santa Cruz, Monterey, and Capitola, and the city of Santa Cruz have the right for a wood burning fireplace. Whether you agree with that or not, they all have that right. And so if this wasn't a public hearing, how would that be handled? Because if you install the wood burning fireplace, it has to have, by building code, a certain clearance from the roof. That's just the way it is. So I go, well, we have to have that. My client understandably wants one because it's consistent with the style of architecture that they have, Queen Anne. You would want a wood burning fireplace. That's a preference, but everybody in the county of Santa Cruz and Capitola has that right. So do you want to make the precedence that you're not allowed to have one unless it meets the current height limits? Frankly, I think that's a bit of a problem in Capitola's code that happens, that it doesn't recognize that particular conflict, that you just have to have a chimney that's above the height limit. If the existing roof, it is above the height limit, if that's understandable. I'm like going, let's say you had an old house, you wanted to put a wood burning fireplace, you needed to put it someplace for whatever reason, in a different place. It is allowed axiomatically, but you would have to get a variance for the height of it because the existing roof exceeds the height limit. Again, how often is it going to happen? How many times are we all going to see a house of this height? Not often. But I did send a shot from a book showing historical, and it's not unusual to have a chimney of this height or this style of house at all. But if staff and the Planning Commission want to discuss how we can make it more attractive, my client is more than happy to discuss that with you all. But he feels very, very convinced that he wants a wood burning traditional fireplace in his house, and I certainly support that. For now that we're allowed to do them, and for this type of house, I would hate to see a gas fireplace there. They still look like not much, and venting them out the side is unattractive, and it's appropriate for this house stylistically and so on. So other than that, I don't have much to say, frankly. The neighbors appear to support the project. I have not heard anybody objecting. Maybe somebody is objecting. It's the first time I've heard it, but both my client and I are happy to continue this and have more discussion on it. So I think it's brought some good discussions. It's like, do you count these type of spaces that are unusable in historical houses, historic houses? They're unusable. There's nothing, I've been through that space. I can't get to the turret without bending over. It's not usable space. Should it be counted in this situation? But maybe it's a variance versus us having to play stupid human pet tricks. I certainly respect that. So I'm going to leave it there and just respond whatever questions you have.
I have a question, Mr. Britton. You're saying that the cupola is inaccessible. You're saying that there is no stairway or drop-down ladder to the attic. How do you get up there?
No, there's a stairway to an attic room that has full height. We counted that as square footage, by the way. So think you have a 3-story house. There's no question we have a 3-story house. And there is a room at the back of the house that we counted as square footage because it's clearly accessible. But there's a door to a space that doesn't meet it's not a 6/8 door. Let's put it that way. It's a attic access door. And so you can go through that door. I can go through it, but I go through it hunched over. My wife, not so much. Yeah, and my kid wouldn't be so much. But it's not a space that's viable to use. It's not a legal space under building code, meaning that it's not viable. I mean, if you guys want to give us a variance to make it viable, love to do it. My client wanted it, and I said, no, that space, enlarging that and making it viable is problematic on so many levels. Yeah, it would violate the historic character of the building. It would violate building code. And I'm like,
Okay. That answers my question.
sorry.
One other question that was actually brought up by Commissioner Ruth was the height of the cupola. Is that open, or is there a roof?
It's tall. I can stay I can stand in the center of it straight up. But if I go try to step by the window, no, I can't. It's not a usable space. Yeah. But you can't get to it. You can't get to it through a usable space. And again, I don't want to lower the ceiling height. I'm just like going, why count it?
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Commissioner Ruth has got his hand raised.
Yeah, Mr. Britton, in the cupola, the turret space, with the floor or the ceiling being dropped down, it appears that it like hits the windows midway. Is that the case?
No, we could drop the ceiling so we have blind windows. You wouldn't be able to tell from outside. But I agree with Commissioner Christensen, it's silly. But you guys tell me how to best address an unusable space that's being counted as square footage. I mean, I don't know what the public benefit is. Maybe there is one, I don't know. So we're just trying to go, look, we would like to use the square footage that this cupola represents, and we'll drop it down. Nobody from the public will ever see.
No, it seems, I agree. It seems ridiculous to me to drop the
It
ceiling.
is, it's completely ridiculous, but you guys tell me. You could also say no, but all it does is I make the ADU bigger, which, so what? It's sort of like going, the garage gets smaller and the ADU gets bigger, and that's where I'm like going, I just don't quite know what to do. And I have no problem, again, continuing this for a discussion of like going,
Can I ask the applicant not to keep repeating himself because we do have a long meeting?
Sorry.
Okay, very good. Are there any other questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you, Mr. Britton. Are there any public comments?
We have one more person on Zoom that would like to comment, John Galena, and I'll need Sean to allow him to speak. And then we do have a written comment as well from Carolyn Swift. John Galena, I believe you can speak now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, my name is John Galena, and I live behind 106 Cliff. I live on 113 Central, been here for 25 years. And just had a few things to say about it. And also, my brother who's an architect is on the Zoom meeting too. If I don't speak well in these terms, but the main thing I had was, with the ADU, they got that chimney right in the middle of my backyard, about 10 feet behind, and I have a 2-story house, and the height of that chimney is like right at my second floor. So I'm concerned if it's solid fuel burning chimney, that smoke's going to end up right in my backyard and in my second floor. So I was wondering if that could be gas instead. I understand, I heard the whole thing about wood and the historic house, but I don't know if the ADU has to have that historical wood burning situation. And then also, I mean, if you agree with that it's, you know, with the wood, because, you know, it'll just all so the winds primarily blow from the west and the northwest, which would put it right into my house. And then if yeah, well, that's one thing. That's the main thing that I have. And also there's that tree, that coastal redwood tree. If you look on the drawings, you can see the canopy comes very close to that chimney top. And is that, you know, with the arborist or, you know, or just safety reasons having it, where they're going to have to keep cutting that coastal redwood back to make for that chimney so it doesn't get too much heat near the tree? Is that going to be an issue? So, you know, short of it, I'd just like to see the chimney gone if that's possible. The owners and the architect think that's okay. Maybe it was the gas vented out the side somewhere away from the tree and not even have a chimney there. That would be really great. And plus the chimney goes above the 16-foot height limit that ADUs are supposed to have. So that's another height thing. So that was my main considerations. But another thing I was hoping or looking at was had a variance for the garage height. Garages are only supposed to be 15 feet. And they want to make the garage almost 16 feet like the ADU. And I'm wondering, instead of bringing it all up to 16 feet, because it's all connected, if we could just all have it at 15 feet, that would decrease the bulk and the, you know, of the unit a little bit, and it would still have that consistent roof line that they wanted, and it wouldn't be a little bit less imposing if it was all at 15 feet instead of that 16 feet. That's my second point. My third point, oh, am I out of time? Is that what that means? Is if they ever have to do redesign the back of the house at all, they're pushing back the southeast corner quite a bit, about 15 feet, which is going to, you know, of course, take away a bunch of my ocean view that I have that I like. If they would ever consider flip-flopping the deck and the room on the second floor, taking bedroom number 2 and moving it from the southeast to the northeast corner, and taking the deck and moving it from the northeast to the southeast corner. That way I would just be looking over a deck instead of to have my ocean view, instead of having a bedroom obstructing the ocean view. They would still have their deck, they still have their rooms, wouldn't change anything. The deck would also be a south facing, so it would be sunnier, warmer deck, and it would also have an ocean view because they could see the ocean off that deck. Where the deck is right now, you can't see the ocean. It's just all blocked. So they'd have an ocean view deck. Yeah, sunny.
Let's finish up.
So that, I just was hoping that maybe they would consider that if they had to redo anything.
All right, thank you,
That's it.
Mr.
Have to
Glina.
say,
Those
but
are
please, the chimney on the ADU is my biggest concern.
Thank you, Mr. Glina. Those were great comments. Katie, are there any other applicant or any other members of the public with their hands raised?
No, it looks like I do have one comment that was written in, so may
You go ahead and read that.
Hi, Katie. I was sent the Planning Commission agenda and I noticed the remodel proposed for the Hooper House at 106 Cliff Avenue. I'm not writing to comment about the plans. I do feel, though, that while the visible history is used to create and justify proposed alterations, the invisible history should also be taken somewhat seriously and not be metaphorically kicked to the curb. Therefore, I'm wondering if I could offer a few details that I think planning commissioners might want to be aware of, because they relate to the story of the house. According to my long ago research, the house lot 11, Block M, was sold by F.A. Hinn to Catherine Lenzen shortly after he opened the Depot Hill subdivision to buyers in 1888. Catherine was the wife of well-known San Jose architect Jacob Lenzen. When Catherine died in 1890, the Capitola property went to Jacob and his children. His son, Theodore, was also an architect and is believed to be the designer of the Cliff Avenue house. Reflections of the Past, an anthology of San Jose, edited by Judith Henderson, includes a description of the Marine Social Club, founded in the 1870s. Several of the early members built summer homes on Cliff and Central Avenues in Capitola, including the Lenzons. Jacob and Theodore were also listed as designers of the San Jose City Hall, Hall of Records, Odd Fellows Hall, the original O'Connor Hospital, the San Jose Normal School, the Agnews Asylum, the San Jose Hotel Vendome, and many others. It concluded that they had made large contributions to the appearance of dwellings and business houses in the Santa Clara Valley. Members of the Lenzon family, Michael and Maria of San Jose, sold the Capitola summer home in 1907 to Joseph Hooper, Harry B. Hooper's father. It's more likely the house was built around 1890, as it states in the Capitola Historic Survey, than in 1904. As far as it is known, Capitola has only one Lenzon building. It's my hope that its future will be handled with care. Fond regards, Carolyn.
So that was from Carolyn Swift. And that was actually sent earlier today regarding this project. And
Okay.
with that, there's no more emails, and I'm going to just check the Zoom again for attendees. It does look like we have another hand up. It's a phone number that ends in 915, and they are now allowed to. They can now speak.
All right, let's keep this short. These comments have been going very long. We have a long agenda, please. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. This is Becky Steinbrunner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I've appreciated the good discussion I've heard tonight, and I want to thank the applicant for preserving the large redwood tree and the other tree on the property. A lot of times I see those just being cut down. So that's all I really want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Katie, can we move on to Planning Commission deliberation then?
We can, yes.
All righty. Who wants to chime in first? Susan Westman, you may speak.
I will start. Try and hit all of our points. First, I would like to thank the architect because I think they have done a very nice job on the design of the remodel of the building, as well as the ADU unit that's in the back. For the cupola, I'm agreeing that I think trying to lower the ceiling is a pretty silly approach. It seems to me that we could let staff determine if it's best for us to simply put a condition on this, maybe even have it recorded that that is not going to be habitable space, that it's going to be an attic, or staff may recommend that we go and do a variance for the floor area ratio. But trying to modify that by lowering the ceiling or raising the floor doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I have no problem at all with people having wood burning fireplaces. I actually have one in my house, and it's what heats my house. I don't see any problem with having a wood burning fireplace. I do have a little difficulty where this one is located, that it requires a chimney that needs to be 71 feet. I mean, excuse me, 41 feet. I think it was 41 feet. So I would like to know if there's any way they can still have a wood burning fireplace in the main house, but come up with a chimney design that's not quite so large as that particular one. My biggest issue with the house is sort of the second floor rear yard deck. Everybody knows that I'm not in favor of them. We have denied them on several other projects. And I don't see any real justification on this project because just because it's a historical home, that there should be a large second floor deck on the side and rear of the property. I think it does have an impact on the adjacent residential neighborhood. I can agree with the neighbor who's concerned about the chimney on the ADU. One of the things that we recognize with the ADUs is that they're being put in what typically would be sort of a backyard setback of a home. And we're allowing them because we want to have more additional residential units. But I'm not certain that it's necessary for an ADU unit to have a wood burning fireplace, which does sound like would have a negative impact on the neighbors. So at this point, that's where I stand on some of the issues. And I look forward to hearing from my other commissioners.
Thank you,
Well, I'll
Commissioner
go
Westman. Any other hands raised? Commissioner Christensen.
I'm just curious, I wanted to clarify, is the ADU under review at all right now? Is if they weren't coming in for another issue, would we be reviewing the ADU at all?
I think the chimney exceeds what our standards are for ADUs and height.
Okay.
Is that true, Katie?
I will have to make sure of that, but I don't think we have any exception to the 16-foot height for the ADU. So, because of that, that could be under review, but otherwise the ADU, as long as it meets the standards for the ADU, there would be no review by the Planning Commission on that.
What about this concern about the 15-foot height? He said that the community member mentioned, Mr. Glina, I think said it should be a 15-foot and the 16-foot height is a variance, or is he mistaken?
It's not a variance. There's an exception in the code to allow the garage to be at have additional height relative to the main structure.
Okay. Other comments, Commissioner Ruth?
Yeah. In regards to the cupola, I don't agree with Susan on this one. I would like to see a variance to make that space usable. It just seems like such a ridiculous idea, as Courtney pointed out, to lower a ceiling in there where it's 4 feet high and not be able to utilize that space. I think a variance would add to the usable space, and we should consider it. I've had the opportunity to tour some of the historic neighborhoods in England and Wales and seen a lot of the old Victorian homes there, and tall chimneys are pretty typical. So I don't really have a problem with the chimney. I think it really adds to the historical nature of the house. On the second story deck, if you look at the way the neighbors to the, I guess it'd be the north and the neighbors to the west and the neighbors to the south on each side, the way those houses are configured and with the ADU in the backyard, I don't see a lot of privacy issues on this deck. And I'm one that's always been adamant about second story decks, but I don't see the issues with this deck that some of those other ones we've had before us have presented. I just think Mr. Britton has really done an excellent job in keeping the historical nature of this house. And those are my concerns or my comments. I would support a gas-fired stove in the ADU, as I have personally been subject to a chimney in about the same proximity to my house, and the prevailing winds blew all the smoke right in my backyard. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Ruth. Commissioner Newman.
Hey, it seems to me that we need to continue this matter. And the applicant has pretty much invited us to do that. There are a number of issues that need to be focused on. For one thing, we need to, we have to notice a variance for the cupola. Everyone seems to agree that just lowering the ceiling height to 3 feet 11 is a silly solution. And a variance is a much better solution. So everyone seems to support that, but we do have to notice it. So we're gonna have to come back anyway. And then there are a few other issues here that maybe can be pursued in the rehearing now that there's been a lot of input from the commission. The only one that I'll address right now is the chimney height. And I don't really understand Mr. Britton's insistence on the right to a wood burning stove. I don't think that trumps all design standards in the city. So that I think they still have to satisfy our design standards or qualify for a variance. And I think the staff report with regard to denial of the variance is fairly convincing to me. So I would leave it open for the new hearing, but that's my preliminary thought on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Newman, and I'll throw in my comments as well. I think that the unusable space is nevertheless considered square footage. So that's 325 square feet that we officially have to count. So that means, so how do you take care of that? Well, you don't add as much to the rest of the house. You don't mass the rest of the house. You have, you want to add 600 and some odd square feet. Well, you're going to have to take into account the fact that you already bitten into that with the 325 square feet that exist already. I'd be willing to, again, look at a variance. I think there's a lot of reasons why we have a variance. Again, the architect talked about the historic nature of the home. I think this is a very unique case. So it gives us a lot of window to accept that variance. I don't know that I would want to agree with that variance. He's adding a lot of structure, including the garage and the ADU, and now he wants to not account 325 square feet. To me, that's a lot of massing you're adding to the neighborhood. But I'm willing to listen to the other commissioners on that. I don't have a problem either with the chimney height. The reason being that, again, because of the Queen Anne style, I think Mr. Britton's letter showing the history of the Queen Anne design is adequate, rational enough to allow that variance. I also agree that the wood burning stove in the ADU is something that we should consider a problem both to the neighbors and to the health of the coastal redwood tree. So with that, I think my side setback issues have been properly addressed, so I don't insist on a change there. But yeah, I think there's room for modifications in this design to make everyone happy. But I'm willing to listen to a motion if anybody. Oh, wait, we have another comment.
one
That's
question?
Commissioner Westman.
So the variance that we're talking about for the cupola and the upstairs space is the floor variance to the floor area ratio that was referred to by the community development director before. I mean, that's
Correct.
okay. Just wanted to clarify that was it. Thank you.
I also wanted to ask, could we, since we're getting direction, it looks like we're headed towards a continuation, get feedback on the second story deck from all commissioners, just so we can.
Before we do that, Commissioner Ruth had his hand up.
Oh, no, I was just scratching my head.
No,
Oh, well, you're
Your hands
online.
up.
Oh, my,
You
this
have
is
it.
okay.
So let's all
Lower
scratch our heads
hand.
on the deck. So Commissioner Ruth has already weighed in and would you like to reply to his thoughts, Commissioner Westman? You still don't like the second floor deck?
I'm still not in favor of the second floor deck. I'll go back and look at it since it's going to be continued, but right now I would say no.
Commissioner Newman?
I need to take a look at it too, and since we're going to have another hearing, they'll give me an opportunity to do that.
Commissioner Christensen?
At this stage, I have no problem with the second story deck, and I agree with Commissioner Ruth sentiments of privacy and.
I don't have a problem with it either, except that I am sympathetic to the neighbor, although we don't guarantee an ocean view. If we are going to allow a second floor deck, which we generally don't do, it would be nice to accommodate the neighbor's wishes. Is kind of my 2 bits. So that's comments on the deck.
So I'll move to continue this item.
I'll second.
So
Do we
have
want to continue it to a date certain so we don't have to republic notice?
We do have to republic notice because if there's going to be a variance.
Oh, you're correct. Thank you.
All right, I have a motion for continuance by Commissioner Newman and a second by Commissioner Christensen. Can we, if there's no further discussion, let's have a roll call vote.
Sure. Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruth,
Aye.
Commissioner Westman,
Aye.
Chair Wilk.
Aye. This item is continued. We'll get to go over this one more time. And let me just say, I appreciate the applicant for putting up with this. This is a big project and you're doing a great job with a real big project. And thank you for your forbearance of all of our questions and issues, because this is a big community issue as well as a private one. With that, we can move on to item C, which is 410 Prospect. Do we have a staff report?
Sean, I believe you're on mute.
Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to try and go through this one as quickly as I can. It's thematically similar to the last. It's a application for a design permit, historic alteration permit, coastal development permit, and variance request to a historic 2-story single-family residence at 1410 Prospect Avenue. So this is the proposed site plan. The project includes the demolition of an existing 1,606 2-story home, as well as the construction of a 1,422 2-story residence in its place within a 796 square foot basement. That basement is not included in the 1,400 square foot number. The proposal would also remodel and relocate an existing non-historic garage. And it also includes a variance request to construct the new residence to retain current nonconformities for required setbacks and floor area ratio. You can see here again, like last time, noted some of the proposed removed and replaced trees. In orange, there are 2 trees in front of the subject property. One is a deciduous tree and one is a cypress. The applicant is proposing to remove both and replace them with one tree that is also off the site and one tree that is in the front yard, which would be a Japanese maple and a gold medallion tree. At maturity, these would meet, this planning plan would meet the 15% canopy coverage requirement for development. Seen here is a dashed line in brown that indicates the extent of the basement area. The basement is contained within the proposed 1st-story footprint with the exception of 2 light wells. And like the previous application and presentation, I'm putting each elevation side by side, existing and proposed. This first one is the existing proposed front elevation. This is the existing and proposed south side elevations. I want to note too, if we have to come back to this, they're faint, but the architect has outlined the current extent of the home underneath the proposed design. So that kind of gives you an idea of massing and general design by comparison. So I can go over that as we go. This is the existing proposed north side elevations. And this is the existing and proposed rear elevations. These face the Capitol Village. There's also a second story deck like the last application on the back side. This does not face any other residences, but yeah, we can discuss that as we move on. The preliminary evaluation by historian Leslie Dill found that the existing structure to be historically significant more in its neighborhood context than in preserved design or materials themselves, noting that much of the original structure had been modified, added to, or had its original materials been covered or replaced. Staff met with the applicant and architectural historian, and on the basis of a replacement structure, recommended that a proposal for a new structure should maintain the historic pattern and streetscape and scale of the existing site. Mr. Bergstein subsequently reviewed the proposed design and found it compatible with the standards, Secretary of Interior standards for reconstruction, citing standards 4 through 6 as most applicable. I cover what those are here, or at least the findings that Mr. Bergstein provided. Just to kind of cover that, the project maintains a unique streetscape and continuous roof line and scale with similar scale and massing as the existing structures. The new project shares materials and architectural features as the original, including the asymmetric roof pitch, the front dormer, double hung windows, and cladding. The application also includes a variance request for both the maximum floor area ratio and the minimum setback requirements. Staff reviewed the project with respect to the required findings for variances A through F in the staff report. Of note that the application will require a variance for the front, first and second story setbacks and the rear. The rest of the nonconformities on the garage are all existing, and the applicant has either maintained those and not exacerbated them or actually improve them by relocating the existing garage entirely within the subject property. So to cover a bit of visual first of the existing site, the project site is a shallow, irregularly shaped lot and small by Capitol standards. The highlighted areas represent the building envelopes that would comply with setback requirements for the R1 primary structures. The darker blue shows the first story envelope, and the light blue shows where a second story extent could be as well. I'll just go back to this photo again. And for reference, this is Prospect Avenue from south to north. The subject property is the second to the end, and it's one of the smallest. Staff reviewed the existing characteristics of Prospect Avenue along the bluff and found that the subject lot is one of the smallest lots in the neighborhood. And of the 8 nearest properties, 5 properties appeared to exceed floor area ratios allowed within the zone of any standard. With respect to setbacks, most homes on the bluff side of Prospect Avenue also do not comply with the front, side, or rear setbacks, or a combination of the 3. Of the nearest 8 properties, 7 do not comply with setback requirements. With that, staff recommends that the commission approve the project based on the conditions of approval and findings, or continue the application and provide direction on what would need to be modified.
Very good. Are there planning commissioners questions of staff?
I have one, Mr. Wilks.
Commissioner Root, go ahead.
Yeah, has the applicant submitted a landscape plan for the area along the path?
Are you referring to the coastal access path behind the property?
Yes.
They have not. That is actually beyond the subject property. It's on the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission property. At this time, they're not proposing to do anything on that site except to remove an existing low-lying deck back in the backyard that encroaches into RTC property.
How much does the RTC property extend on the west side of the path?
I actually don't have that exact figure, but I can pull up the site plan because I think I did leave enough to see where the extent of that pathway is. So this line right here is the property boundary on the rear side facing the bluff and the trail. The trail's noted in light gray right here. I don't have an exact measurement on that. I can get one for you if you'd like, but it looks like at minimum it's probably 15 feet away.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt the property owner is going to utilize that RTC property. I don't know. I'd like to see how we control what happens on that property because, you know, it's going to get utilized by the property owner.
So I can only add to that at this time that our staff, both in planning and in public works, did speak both with the architect as well as a representative from the RTC about how they are looking at handling easements, new easements on their property, specifically along this area, among others, because the encroachments are not unheard of, in the railway corridor. As mentioned, that there's nothing at this time that's been proposed. We did discuss it with the applicant about what they were intending to do. And we basically gave them an option that if they wanted to do some development there, it was either going to have to be included in the package with some indication that they had the tentative approval of the RTC, or that they actually had a lease in hand before we could consider it. And the applicant opted to not make any action at this time other than to say that they're going to be removing the deck, which is a necessity for the construction of the home as it is.
Okay. What kind of engineering tests and soil tests are required for the basement?
We also spoke with our building official about this and also with the architect. They've already obtained some engineering on the structure, the civil engineering, as well as, from what I'm told, a geotechnical report. And speaking with our building official, Robin Woodman, I was told definitively that a geotechnical report would be required for the scope of this kind of work, and especially with her familiarity of this area being slightly sandy, loamy soils. So no one at this time, both in public works planning or in the building department, felt that a geological report was necessary from the available knowledge and the existing reinforcements of the site, and that it wasn't, being actively eroded by, say, the ocean, but that a geotechnical report would be emphatically required. So that's within the conditions already.
Okay, thank you, Sean.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing no other hands raised, I have one question. So on 106 Cliff Avenue, we've identified that style as a Queen Anne style, very well known. Is there a style of this particular house? I know it's an old house, but is it consistent with any kind of recognized architectural style?
So I don't actually have the evaluations in front of me, and it's been a little while since I read them front to back, but my understanding was that they actually didn't have a specific design or represent a development pattern. And that was both in the fact that it was it seems that it was built and modified over time to address whatever needs of the current owner were. That was noted by the first historian, Leslie Dill.
Yeah, the reason I ask, and my next question is probably going to be for the applicant, but I worry that since this has been called historical and it had a historical review, that the applicant perhaps unnecessarily tried to meet a style of architecture that no one particularly insists on. So I'll wait and ask the applicant a question on that. So with that, then we can ask for public comment. Is the applicant here and do they want to state their case, or are there any other public comments?
Yes, so we have Derek Van Alstein. Derek, you should be able to speak now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, it's taken a while to get here, but I'm glad you stayed for the duration this evening anyway. I'd like to thank staff for all the work they've done. I mean, there's a lot of thought has gone into this. What we tried to do with this project is to make sure that we did the best we could with it with what we had. So to answer Peter's question, no, it's a generic style, and it just has to do with the pattern. The historical value has to do with the pattern of construction. And in this house being built in 1901, there were 6 or 7 houses. That all shows up in the historic report. A lot of these houses weren't grand houses on the other side of the river, yeah, but not so much on this side. And they were pretty much all worker bees. So you had fishermen and plumbers and whatnot. And that's how this whole segment of Capitola was built, actually. And so the historian's point was, yeah, you can replace it, but we don't want to lose the value of what it does to the neighborhood. It needs to read as much as possible the way that it was before it was taken down. So that's where we started, and as we went along, we tried every which way to get rid of as many nonconformities as possible. These property lines were all over the place. We were over on the front side by a couple inches, 2.5 inches, I think. The garage was over the property line. Some of in the rear was over the. Well, it wasn't the rear, but definitely the 2 sides and the front. So that's kind of how this all developed, and yet the only way to get them a usable space was to put an upper level deck in, and obviously, it's a great view there, and it's not going to bother any neighbors. I don't think there's any downside to the deck on this particular property. We have started a conversation with RTC. They work slowly, and we chose not to saddle up and ride with them, but we will in the future if they respond. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have. The couple of things that I might throw in is that, yes, we've already started civil engineering. We already have a geotechnical report. We have engineers already on board, ready to go, so that we can make sure that this is safe and sound, and that it's a good contributor to the neighborhood. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, so let me jump in, since I kind of started down this path of asking the historical question. And the reason I asked that is because as I walked around it and saw that the existing house has shingles and your proposed house has shingles and the windows are about the same size, it made me wonder that if in fact you had a clean sheet of paper and there weren't all these historical requirements, would you and the applicant end up with the same design, or did you feel unnecessarily constrained by the concern that the planning commission would insist on something historically accurate.
Well, I look at it as a challenge. So, and I think we met the challenge. I think we've done a good job of it. Would it be the same if we'd started out without an historical context? Yeah, probably it would be different.
And I guess where I'm heading with that is I'm not asking you to redesign it or giving you permission to or wherever that goes, but just the notion of things like minor changes that you might come along with, in my opinion, they tend to come back if they're quote unquote significant changes. They're made to come back in front of the planning commission, and I wouldn't think that things like if you decided not to go with the shingles or you decided to go with a different window style for whatever practical reason, that hopefully that wouldn't drag you back in front of the planning commission. I just also want to just thank you for remaining in the community and continuing to contribute your significant architectural talents and design wizardry to our city. So are there any other questions of the applicant? I mean, of the architect, designer? It seems like Susan Westman has a question.
Yes.
Go ahead, Susan.
So it's my understanding that with a historical structure such as this one, that if you don't get a sign off from the historical architect that you are, replacing something in kind, that then you have to go through the process of doing an environmental impact report to remove a historic structure if you wanted to build something completely different. Is that correct?
It can go that direction, yes. But it can.
Right.
but
So there's some advantages to you to putting back a structure that meets sort of the integrity of what is on the street now.
Yeah, so if you look at the front of this house, and Sean did a nice comparison, we tried to make it feel like it did or like it does today when it's redone. So it has the same basic feeling from the street.
Right.
And I get that. I didn't try to make it be something else or make it be modern or use different. It's a very modest house.
Right. I think you've done a very nice job on the design. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the designer? All right, then let's move forward with other public comments. Katie, do we have any?
I think you're muted.
Katie is muted, yes. Do we have?
Sorry, that's not very helpful. Jeffel, Jeffl, you're muted, but it's your turn to speak.
Yes, good evening, Commission. My name is Jeff Luchetti. I have a home at 5055 Jewel Street, directly kitty corner to the house in question. And I received the planning package last Friday evening and started to take a look at it, and it raised some concerns for me with regard to the design and how it might affect some of what I have. And so I met with the architect yesterday, and we looked at it carefully and tried to decipher what was really happening with the second floor rear of the house. And we think we figured it out, but we weren't able to get it pinned down. The architect was supposed to raise this issue with you this evening and ask if staff could possibly assist in resolving the issue, but lacking that request from the architect, I would ask for continuance of the matter. There are too many discrepancies in the applicant's drawings and the staff report that makes it difficult to understand exactly what's happening here. I can give you a couple examples on the project data sheet for the architect. He indicates that the proposed height is 23 feet. And on the development standards from the city, the staff is indicating that it's 24 foot 4 inches. So there's a discrepancy there. I don't know which one it is. Secondly, on the second story side yard, the first story side yard is 10 foot setback. On the second floor, it indicates 5'9" with a variance. I'm not sure how that's happening because that would suggest it extends over the side of the house. So that's a bit confusing to me. When you look at the project data sheet from the applicant, the rear yard, first and second floor says 20 foot setback. And when you look at the development standards on the city sheet, it says that on one side it is 9'8", and on the other side it is 7'7". I can go on if you'd like, but there's enough inconsistencies between the two reports here that I feel it's necessary to continue this, let the applicant and staff decipher what is really happening here. The drawings that are issued with the packet are not to scale, and there are no dimensions on the drawings that would lead me to what's actually happening here. So I would like a further opportunity to review it and work with the applicant on my concerns. Thank you.
Let me ask you a question, Jeff, and I can't remember your last name. Do you have any overarching concerns like massing or the second story deck or setbacks or something that's not, detail specific, but an overarching concern?
My primary concern is a view that this variance is allowing that's going to interfere with the view that I have from my house. And I would say, normally speaking, when you design within the zoning code and you want to build a second floor, you have every right to do so, and your neighbor has no right to complain because you are working within the standards set by zoning. In this case, they're asking for many variances, and that is impacting what I have and see from over here. I think that the biggest issue I have with massing on the project is the second floor. The second floor area has been increased significantly. And when you push this structure back, the 5 feet that they're doing, it becomes taking out the cypress tree, so on and so forth. It becomes quite top heavy to me.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions from the public?
Yes, there's more public comment. Sorry, let's see. So next we'll take the caller that their phone number ends in 915. And there we go.
Hello, this is Becky Steinbruner. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I have to ask just a basic question. Why does the owner want to completely demolish an historic building? Are there problems that cannot be fixed feasibly with it? Why does it have to be completely demolished rather than remodeled and accommodate historic context? It's 115 years old, and I feel strongly that we as a community have to do all we can to support preservation of historic structures like this to enrich our community. I think it's very important. I'm also very troubled that the cypress tree will be removed. That is a heritage tree, and that should not be removed. It should be preserved. I wonder about the purpose of this new basement. I am happy to see that there is in the conditions of approval a lot of language about making sure that there are qualified archaeological observers, and in particular Native American observers at the site during all ground disturbance. That is encouraging, and I like the level of detail that is given in the conditions of approval to make sure seemingly that would happen and follow through and be reported. But I have to wonder why a basement here, and I do not see any discussion about high water tables. I wonder if that has been discussed, if there have been any testing for the groundwater level. I do know that Soquel Creek Water District has a groundwater monitoring well near that house, and having visited it once, I think that at certain times of the year, the groundwater levels can be quite high. It's called a perched groundwater table there. So that needs to be evaluated. And those are my main concerns, that I would much rather see a historic building preserved, remodeled, and kept intact than to completely be demolished. And if it is demolished, I would request that all salvageable material be preserved and used. I saw something in there about historic wooden elements being used, but that needs to be identified. And I'm very aware of the status of the landfills these days, and we can't be filling them up with construction demolition materials. We really need to be on top of salvaging things as much as possible. But I, again, would much rather see this not demolished at all, and that the heritage cypress tree be preserved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Steinbrunner. Other comments from the public? You're on mute again, Katie.
Sorry, next we have Steve Kell. And Steve, you'll just have to unmute yourself.
We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello.
Yes. My name is Steve Kellenberger. I own the property right across the street. So I'm right at the corner of Prospect and Jewel.
Steve, you're breaking up a little bit. Is there a way to maybe take yourself off speaker or something? We're missing every other word.
Oh, you are. Let me see if I can lower my computer. Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, and it also helps if there are no other devices on in your house with the same Zoom on. I don't know.
There's no other devices. Hold on. Yeah. Is that a little better?
No, well, you're legible, so go ahead.
Well, I have owned the property right across the street for about 38 or 40 years, and coincidentally, I owned the property right next door to 1400 Prospect. And Roger Mack and I worked on that terrific garage, which is going to be replaced, which I was going to replace. I have three major issues. Number one, that the massing of the proposed residence bothers me a bit because it's been moved to the right by approximately 5 feet. I met with Sean. I think it was something like 4 feet 9 inches exactly. Secondly, I think the cypress tree has been impacted by lighting over the years, and I don't think that it's quite as valuable as some people might perceive it. I'm, for one, for removing the tree. Canopy just completely drapes the house, blocks partially blocks a view. The third thing that I don't understand is why Derek Van Alstine is proposing 10 parking on the left side of the residence. He's proposing two parking spaces with a view. So you're going to have one of the smallest lots on Prospect with allocation for 3 parking spaces. One in the garage and 2 on the left. What he's effectively done is shifted the footprint of the proposed structure to the right by about 5 feet, which impacts our view. And it's for it's to accommodate the parking.
Okay, Mr. Steve, I'm going to have to cut you off. Your time is up. Let me try to summarize because you were breaking up. Let me try to summarize your issues. One is you don't like the fact where the house was located. It was been moved to the right. That affects parking, and you think that accommodation could be made to improve the parking. And then the cypress tree, you'd like to preserve that. Are those your three items?
Yeah, that's essentially it. I'm going to write a note to Derek and also to Alex Johnson, whom I know, the owner.
Okay, yeah, Steve, I'm sorry, you're really breaking up. We're going to have to move ahead. I apologize for the bad sound quality. Katie, are there any other public comments?
Let's see here. Sorry. No other public comments. I am going to now check the emails, and no, just an email for our next item. So.
Very good. Let's move on to Planning Commission deliberation then. Does anybody want to weigh in first on this issue? Or submit a motion? Commissioner Ruth.
Yeah, I just say, I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to go inside of this house, but I've been in there, and I'm not sure architecturally how you would define it other than maybe glorified shed. If you laid down on the living room floor, you would wind up in the corner towards Depot Hill. It has such a tremendous slope. So, you know, I think the possibility of preserving it are pretty nil. And, you know, my only concern is the basement, and hopefully the staff can decipher the engineering report that comes back and proceed from there.
Thank you. Commissioner Christensen.
I agree with Nick, or with Commissioner Ruth. I think this is going to be a great refreshment to this building. There's no preserving it. I think I read in the report, it said that just the structure doesn't really have any architectural historical significance. It's just that it's old. I think that Mr. Van Alstine did a good job in revamping everything, especially for such a small postage stamp of a parcel. But yeah, I don't have a problem with it at all. I think it's great.
Thank you. Commissioner Westman.
I pretty much agree with everyone's comments. I don't think this is a building that really can be preserved and remodeled. And I think that the architect has done a nice job on creating a design that still fits into the neighborhood. I do wonder if we want to continue the item, since the issue of some discrepancies on the measurements was raised by one of the members of the public, because unfortunately, with these kinds of projects, 6, 8 inches does matter. But other than that, I'm in favor of the project.
Thank you. Commissioner Newman, any comments?
No comments.
Commissioner Christensen, you still have your hand up. Did you have more comments or?
No,
Okay.
I would make a motion to approve. Do we have to do?
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? I'll second it. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Christensen and a second by Chair Wilk. Any discussion on this? On why we should or should not approve this project?
Yeah, I would like to see the discrepancies in the measurements resolved first.
Planner
Can I ask
Sasanto
staff
here.
if they agree that there are discrepancies in the measurements? I mean, we have a commenter saying that there are discrepancies. Can staff verify that there are these many errors?
Thank you, Chair Wilk, for that opportunity. I was looking at some of the hard copy plans here in my office while we were getting some of those comments. I'm not sure if the caller was referring to going between what was on the plan sheet table as opposed to what's in the staff report analysis. But if so, I mean, we don't normally require that their figures match ours. We're mostly looking that their project meets development standards. So sometimes they're not going to match exactly. But as far as the development table itself, I did go through it a bit. The existing and proposed heights are accurate. So there is no issue based on that and what the plans measure to. And then the one thing I did note was on the side yard, second story, the proposed cell should say, it does say 10 feet. It should say north, and but it does specify the south dimensions, feet, sorry. So the setback numbers are correct. It doesn't articulate whether or not the top setback is north or south, but the following figure does. So that was the only discrepancy I noticed. He might have mentioned a different setback standard, but I'm not sure. I did actually get calls from a number of the people submitting public comments tonight on this project, beginning of this week, I believe. And that was noted while they called us that it was a typo. So I thought it was amended, maybe it wasn't, but that should be accurate. And if there's any other questions about the other comments that were raised, I can go down the list.
Yeah, I would hate to have to have a continuance on this just on a bunch of drafting cleanup issues, if that's kind of what they are. I'm sure staff is going to be able to ensure that, and the building inspector is going to make sure that everything is to code and the drawings are accurate.
That resolved my question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Commissioner Wilk, I also looked at the plans quickly in the development standards table, and they seem to match up. I do see, however, that the architect is raising his hand. And since the neighbor approached him on this, would you like to hear from him again on this to see if there are known discrepancies that could be cleaned up?
I would.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Van Alstine, you may speak.
I'm here in center stage. I also noticed the way, I think it was the way it was put together. And not only that, but it's because of the angles and because of where the house is located and because of where the garage is located, the setbacks may seem odd, but I think they're correct. When we do it, it's all done in CAD and the numbers don't lie. So all I can tell you is I think what we put together is solid. And there may be people are having a hard time reading it.
All right. Thank you, Derek. Are there any other questions before we call for a vote? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Louis, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Ruth,
Aye.
Commissioner Westman,
Aye.
Chair Wilk.
Aye. Motion passes, and good luck with the project. Very good. Now we can move on to item D. I know we're not the least bit tired yet, so we have plenty of time and energy to talk about parklets. Do we have a staff report?
We do. So the presentation will be made this evening by Michael Arnone. Michael Arnone and Jennifer Colfer have been working with the city on designing a parklet for the village, the prototype design. And first, I just want to give an overall update. I did this quickly at our last Planning Commission meeting, but our ordinance is under review currently by the Coastal Commission. We were hoping that it would be reviewed next week in April, but we've hit a couple roadblocks and some items that we need to work with the Coastal Commission on. So we're hopeful for May, and we'll continue to keep the Planning Commission and the City Council and the public updated. We'll be sending out we're going to be discussing a possible continuation of the temporary program at the April 28th meeting, and we'll get notice out to all the businesses in the village so that they're aware that we're relooking at this. But the purpose of tonight is to look at a prototype design. We wanted to get some preliminary feedback because once the Coastal Commission does certify our ordinance, we will be taking this design forward to you for a coastal development permit that any business will be able to utilize. And free of charge, they just have to, they have to pay for the construction, but the design will be free. So with that, I will hand it off to Michael Arnone and Jennifer Colfer. And would you like me to, would you like to share your slides, Michael, or shall I?
Either way, Katie, Jennifer can share her screen if you can do that, Jennifer, and then you can kind of move through it at your own pace. So,
sure.
Hi everybody. We'll try to get through this fairly quickly. I know it's late and you've been sitting for a while, so I'll let Jennifer go ahead and introduce the product, and we'll just talk through it.
Okay. There we go. Can everyone see it? We all good?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like Katie said, we're here to share the conceptual design guidelines for the Capitola Parklet. We're still in kind of the design development phase of this at this time. But the main goal at this point was to provide a design that kind of complemented the existing streetscape of the Capitola Village, and also made it so that there was consistency between all the parklets that are implemented by the business owners. So we have a design framework that they can work from. And also a design concept that's fairly easy for them to implement, that doesn't require, a lot of complex construction. So the concepts that you'll see in this document work for both the angled parking places and the parallel parking places that are in the village. And the components that are part of this concept are the dining platform that you see here, raised planters, a railing detail, wheel stops, trench drain to address the stormwater runoff and drainage, as well as like the dining amenities that the business owners might want to implement, things like string lights and obviously the dining furniture and the umbrellas. The main difference between the concepts that we've come up with is the actual planter itself. There's
Excuse me, Jennifer, before you leave that previous slide, could I just get a clarification?
Sure.
So I'm looking at the bike rack and the wheel stop and imagining a car next to it in the parallel or in the angled parking. How does the bike get there? Is the wheel stop, should the wheel stop be on the other side or?
I think the purpose of the wheel stop is to kind of keep people from turning into that space. And so, yeah, it's not ideal for the bikes to park there. I mean, the access isn't ideal. They could squeeze between perhaps or come around from the sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good, there's 2 to 3 feet of space. If you look at the scale between the end of the left end of the wheel stop and where that line is, if a car is actually parked between the lines, a bike should be able to get through there fairly easily, or they lift over, the wheel stop, or like Jennifer said, they come at it from the sidewalk. But the wheel stops also could be, that's showing a certain length. We could get them that are, slightly smaller than that as well to give you more room.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, so going to the elevation and talking about the difference between the two planters. One option would be a fiberglass planter. Another option would be a concrete planter. The dimensions are similar. The main difference between them is the weight of the planter. The concrete planter is about 1,500 pounds, where the fiberglass planter is 465 pounds. So that weight creates a more sturdy kind of solid barrier between the roadway and the parklet. Aside from that, one minor difference is the height of the planter. The fiberglass planter is about half a foot taller, which it doesn't seem like is a lot, but you can kind of see in the elevation, the proportions are different, and it kind of gives a more feeling of enclosure or sense of enclosure with the taller planter. But I think the key thing to focus on would be that safety aspect between the two planters. Moving on to the parallel configuration for the parallel parking spaces, we've gone with a little bit longer planter. So there's more of a barrier there, less railing space. You can kind of see it in the elevation. Here. Better barrier between the road and the parklet.
Yeah, part of that, is the parallel spaces we're talking about are on Cap Ave. The brewery right now has one, and it's, if Jennifer, you go back to the plan view, that's about the right dimension. It's exactly the right dimension. It's 42 feet. So that's kind of what they have now, in terms of the size of the space. But there, because of the amount of traffic and the narrow nature of Cap Ave, we felt that it was the security of the thing is a little more important on this street. So, I think that's why the planters are a little closer together, and they're done that way purposely for the safety. And the wheel stops, as you can see, are on either end for people that are parking on those spaces that are adjacent to our little parklet here.
Okay, so and then moving on to the actual components themselves. For the platforms or the decks, we have two different kind of options. One would be a wood framed deck with a leveling mount that allowed the grade to be, the grade change between the crown of the road and the curb, so that the deck can be leveled. In terms of the actual decking itself, it could be like a plastic wood decking, recycled plastic wood decking that would be pretty durable and low maintenance. Or if someone wanted to do something like a natural redwood decking, that would be an option too. And then another option in terms of how the deck is supported are these bison pedestals, which are typically used in like a roof rooftop decking. And these pedestals are what, frame or support the deck, and they're adjustable to level the deck. And in terms of the decking material, there's a wood tile that's kind of like a parquet or a concrete tile.
Yeah, we should interject here that the platform that we're talking about is at the same elevation as the sidewalk and top of curb. So there is no step down. This would be totally accessible. And that was, one of the goals that we have. So that's why this platform is raised. However we do that, but that's the reason, because we want the platform to be level with the walkway.
Right. And then addressing the way that stormwater can, proceed through the gutter, using some kind of a steel frame and a steel trench grate. This would be the platform on this side, and this is the curb and sidewalk here. So there's a clear space for stormwater to run through and a way to access that gutter, as well as a detail that runs along the perimeter of the platform that allows water to flow, from the crown to the gutter. And in terms of the railings, a simple wood railing, a metal railing with a horizontal pickets, or maybe even some kind of a decorative metal screen that, this is what bridges the space between the two planters. This is an image of the fiberglass planter, just to give you a sense of what it would look like. Again, the concrete planters, these are just images pulled off of the website of the manufacturers. They're not the exact dimensions of the ones that we're showing on the plan view. A suggestion for the bike racks, the wheel stop. And then we kind of picked a couple of different types of the furnishings. As we get farther into the narrowing things down, there would be a schedule that the business owner would choose from, to be able to order these things and the colors. Different types of chairs, depending on kind of what look they want to go with. Another option would be a set, and different price points within these as well. Examples of umbrellas and stands. And then also string lights if they wanted to incorporate that for nighttime, with some kind of a way to suspend them with a deck mounted pole. And then also part of that would be, or part of the final plan would be a suggested plant list with sun and shade plants, all plants that are drought tolerant and that do well in planters.
Excuse me, Jennifer, I noticed that Commissioner Westman has her hand raised. Did you want to interrupt the presentation with a question?
Of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to make certain I was reading the plans right. So when these dining areas come up next to the sidewalk, you show no railing between the sidewalk and the platform. Is that correct?
Correct.
So there's nothing to sort of protect the diners from people going down the sidewalk, or to stop the dining from, somebody moving their chair out onto the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Okay, so getting back to the final two slides is the suggested plant list, or plants to choose from list that would be drought tolerant and appropriate for their sunshade requirements. And unless I don't really have anything else to share, that's kind of the end. If anyone has questions, I'll turn it back over to the commission.
Yeah, let me just throw in one thing. There are going to be some site-specific, things that we'll have to figure out. Again, as Jennifer mentioned, this is kind of just a schematic of, a concept that, you can look at and decide on. But there are manholes, there are some, utility grates and things like that that are in the street, depending on where these actually go. And so in that case, we'd have to come up with a way of having a removable portion of the deck surface. And again, it's site specific to exactly where we are in the village. And that's something we've thought about. It just, we're not showing a solution yet because the problem actually doesn't exist yet. So, but we did think about it, and it's something that will have to be addressed, when these get built.
So I've got an overall question. You mentioned that there's all these different options. Like, for example, on the railing, we said, okay, there's these different railings. Are you suggesting that the applicant would have a choice of those railings, or you're asking the planning commission to pick one?
I think both. I mean, I think we could offer two options, like let's say maybe the wood railing and the metal railing. But if there's strong opinions that we just want to do one, I think that would work as well.
I also just want to comment, in the staff report, we had raised there's two types of planters proposed, and we thought it would add, to the overall feel and look of the village to be consistent with one planter and then give options for the railings in between. So we're hoping to get some feedback on preferences for fiberglass versus concrete.
Commissioner Ruth has his hands up. One hand anyway.
And I do believe we have, once we get through questions, there's definitely members of the public interested in this.
Yeah, Commissioner Ruth, you're on mute.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I have a question regarding the deck construction. The curb height is typically 5 inches, maybe 6 at most. And you've got the pedestals, but Trex decking requires joists every 16 inches. So I'm wondering how you fit the pedestals and the floor joists and the Trex decking within 5 inches height to make it match the level of the sidewalk.
Yeah, it depends on which approach, they want to go with, whether they're going to use, the tile style or the decking style. And there's other ways of doing this. Some of the other ones we looked at had, the joists that are just shimmed, follow the contour of the street and are anchored that way. And then the decking sits on top. So there's, in terms of construction, again, Mick, we haven't gotten to the point where we're doing a construction detail for this. I think the purpose, and Katie can kind of continue this, but I mean, it's really just to kind of give the concept, which style of things you like at this point.
Yeah, just seems there's not a lot of height to accommodate everything that has to be put into the construction of one of these decks. Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Commissioner Christensen.
I worked with the pedestals in the past, and I think they're a great solution for this type of decking with either the bison pedestals or the leveling mounts. But it doesn't require framing. I just wanted to add that.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So we're here. So you're requesting comments on your presentation, and
So are we going to hear from the public first and then make our comments?
Is that how we do this? Okay. Well, this is a presentation, just a general comment. So yes, I'm sorry. Yes. So we have our staff presentation. We have gone through our planning commission questions. And now let's go to public comments.
Okay, it looks like we've received an email from Doug Conrad, the owner of Capitola Wine Bar, and I'm going to have that read aloud right now.
April 7th, 2022. Planning Commissioners. What a tough ride this has been, and unfortunately still continues to be. Business is still far from being back like it was before COVID. The beach is not as full as before. Parking spots once always filled all day go empty for hours. The sidewalks are less crowded. Our tourists and locals still have not returned to the village as they had before the pandemic. This is why restaurants and bars are still in a recovery mode. Asking us to invest now in the city's new park-led program is bad timing. We are still in a recovery mode, and for the city to ask restaurants and bars to incur this high expense at this time is especially difficult. For some, it would be impossible. We ask planning to make the recommendation to City Council to extend the temporary park-led program to align with the rest of the state's outdoor dining program. The state has extended outdoor dining and to-go alcohol service until December 31st, 2026. This will give time for business to recover across our state. The time will come when the village business can afford to participate in the city's program. When that happens, I would suggest focusing more on the safety for our customers sitting in the parking spots. San Jose Ave in particular, cars can achieve a high rate of speed and the current plans show no protection from traffic. Concrete planters are not traffic barriers. Every parkette should have enough bike parking for at least 6-8 bikes, ideally more. Parkettes need the ability to be anchored to the ground. Expensive stainless steel levelers save on labor, but anchoring and leveling to the ground would be safer and less costly for many reasons. Thank you for your time. Please recommend to council continuing the temporary parkette program to align with the rest of our state so we can recover. Then, when we can invest correctly, we can build something safe that we all can be proud of. Thank you. Doug Conrad, owner, Capitola Wine Bar.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any more emailed comments, and no Zoom attendees have their hands up. So,
Okay, so now we can move on to planning commission deliberation and comments. Anyone want to chime in? If not, I will. My general comments on this approach, I like what you've done, and it gives me a lot of insight as to what we're addressing. I like the notion of the planters and their placement, and like, okay, that's the consistent look of Capitola, are these planters and these locations. I don't like the design of the planters. I think perhaps just a flat boxy planter maybe we can improve on the design, since every single parklet's going to be lined with these things. So maybe there can be some distinction in the planters. I would tend to prefer the fiberglass, simply because it's probably easier to move them. Because again, these parklets may be coming and going, and something that's real permanent might be problematic as the various restaurant owners decide to ignore their, or rather not renew their leases. So beyond that, I think that the other thing I'd like to see consistent, other than the planters, would be the decking. So I don't really care what the decking is, but I think every deck should be the same, like a sidewalk. You don't want to have a different sidewalk on every block of the city. So I would want a consistent deck. But beyond that, I would think that the railing and the furniture and the lighting and all that could be customized to the restaurant. And I wouldn't have any objection to a lot of stylization there. Those are my comments. Commissioner Westman had her hand raised.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Commissioner Westman.
Overall, I think the design is really good. I think this is a great place to start. It's hard for me to say if I like the fiberglass planters or the concrete ones at this point, because I haven't really seen them. I've seen some images taken offline. So before we made that final decision, we might be able to want to go someplace and actually look at them. If I had to say tonight, I would probably be inclined to go with the concrete planters, just because I think they do create a better barrier between the vehicles and the dining area. I do have major concerns about not having something that sets these areas off from the sidewalks. Sidewalks, particularly on the Esplanade, get very crowded on summer weekends and busy weekends. And I think not having something there to sort of protect the diners and delineate that space is going to be a problem. I think it's also going to be a problem with, somebody deciding that they're going to push their chair out from the table a bit, and suddenly we have a chair on the sidewalk and we have crowds and baby strollers and all of that going on. So I would like to see some delineation in the area where the dining areas abut to the sidewalk. It's fine with me for there to be some choices about what kind of railing they want to have between the planters. I agree, maybe we want 2 or 3 choices that would be available for the applicants to choose. I do like the fact that the decking is going to be level with the sidewalk rather than have sort of the funky ramps that we have right now that go down to the street and the dining's on the street. And I like the lights that are being proposed and the furniture. So those are my comments.
Let me just chime in then and say that I agree with at least your comment about the sidewalk delineation between the parklets, because you're right, that'll be a problem. So another vote for that. Commissioner Newman.
Okay. From the standpoint of landscape architecture, it all seems nice to me, except I didn't see any heaters. But it's hard for me to focus on decking and details of design and a program that, to me, from a land use and zoning standpoint, is such a major, potentially major change in our city and has not been adequately dealt with, in my opinion. And moving to a more permanent solution to these parklets without having really thought through all the ramifications of that, just because we had this emergency COVID response, is really hard for me to digest. Our commercial parking ordinance is just completely destroyed now by all of this. And there are other aspects of it's a game changer long-term for our community, and all the consequences and unintended consequences of it have not been thought through. And so it's hard for me, as I say, to worry about the size of an umbrella.
I agree with you, Commissioner Newman.
Well, as I do, but when I asked staff, the topic was to be limited to design and not whether or not or where we want the parklets. So any other comments? Let's see. Courtney, you have your hand back up again.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Is there going to be any type of requirements on maintaining the plants from the plant selection list so they don't die and just everything looks shabby kind of thing? That's a question for staff, I guess. Am I on mute?
Sorry, no, I can hear you. I was on mute. There are maintenance standards within the draft ordinance to maintain. I have it pulled up right now, taking a look. Trash and maintenance. There's an outdoor dining area in the public right of way shall be maintained in a clean and safe condition as determined by the city, including as follows: All trash shall be picked up and properly disposed of. All flower beds and planters shall contain live, healthy vegetation. All tables, chairs, equipment, and structures must be kept clean and operational. So there is.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Westman, your hand is back up.
My hand's back up. So this may be too late, but I really object to the term parklet because that implies that this is a space that's going to be open to the public. And it's my understanding that the public's not going to have access to this space even when they're not being used by the restaurants. So I would much prefer if we could start calling them, outdoor dining decks or something that is a more appropriate term for what they're going to be. Thank you.
Okay, other comments? Commissioner Ruth.
Yeah, I like the design on paper here. I think they look great. But I think when we sandwich those designs in between parked cars, they're not going to look so great. And while I support the design aspect, I just don't support the locations we're going to allow them.
Oh, I don't either. Commissioner Christensen, you have your hand up still, or do you have?
No, I keep forgetting to lower it. Sorry about that.
Okay, well, this is my first meeting where I actually figured out how to actually look at the hands raised. So this is new for me too. Okay, I see no more hands raised. Does staff feel that they've gotten adequate feedback from the Planning Commission?
I think so. I'm not hearing a preference or I'm hearing I've only heard two preferences on the design of the planters. And they're not in alignment, but it sounds like you'd like to see some examples. If Commissioner Westman mentioned maybe taking a look at examples if we can find some locally. Did anyone else have feedback on?
Well, let me pull the string on that a little bit. So my issue on the planter, and maybe we can see if anybody else agrees with this, is that the notion of, okay, what is consistent with Capitola? Okay, all of these parklets have the same planters in front of them. And we can debate on the height or the width or whatever, the spacing. But my thought is that's what's consistent. That's what gives Capitola its consistent feel, that and a consistent decking. I don't particularly like the flat, boxy planter, but my question, I guess, to the rest of staff, do they agree that the planters and their location should be the dominant feature of the Capitola design of the outdoor dining units?
I think the biggest, heftier ones are probably the most reasonable ones because it's only a matter of time before somebody gets mowed down while they're sitting having a cocktail.
But you like the idea of having a consistent look from parklet to parklet?
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll chime in that I believe our Public Works Director also is in agreement with Commissioner Ruth's assessment that the heavier concrete does provide more protection due to its weight than the fiberglass planters.
I agree with that as well.
Okay, so there's any other consistent looks that we want to bring out? Again, I suggested that maybe the railing could be something that's very independent. But are there any other consistent looks anybody wants to see?
I agree with Commissioner Ruth. I think you need to have the taller planters, particularly on the street side, to try and provide a buffer from the diners and the cars going by them.
And I'll agree with that as well.
So
and I think you said those were the fiberglass ones. But I'm certain the concrete planters can come in any size we decide we want.
I believe they can, but if Jennifer, if you could chime in, I think Jennifer did a lot of pricing and seeing what would be like the better economically feasible options out there. And that's how we ended up with these two.
That's correct. Finding one that was bigger or taller to have that shipped, it's pretty cost prohibitive. I mean, they just end up being quite big. And finding a local person or a local manufacturer has been challenging too. So the shipping cost is the main item. The concrete planter itself is not as expensive as the fiberglass, but the shipping cost is what makes it more in line with the fiberglass planter.
The other thing, keep in mind that either the fiberglass or the concrete, there are different colors available. So, from parklet to parklet, we could switch the colors. There'd be consistency of the form and the height and the shape. We could, even within one parklet have, different colors if you wanted something a little more, like the Venetian, the different tones and colors, but the same, material. So there's some ways to, I think, Peter, you're concerned about the monotony of the thing. Keep in mind, these do come in different colors.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I was just wondering why, if there was a reason why there's not, I mean, I know you just provided two options for simplicity's sake, probably, but did you consider steel, like a Corten steel or anything like that? That would be kind of, they make them tall and they can be attached to the concrete or stacked on top of that deck or anything like that, and they withstand weather.
Yeah, we did consider that, and I think the general consensus was that they were a bit too rustic in style for the existing streetscape that's down there. But I'm totally open to suggestions and exploring that avenue if people think that that's a good way to go.
Okay, any more comments, or staff, do you have any more questions of the commission?
I think we got some great direction. So we'll look more towards the concrete, but at a higher, if we can find a reasonably priced higher planter. It also sounds like Chair Wilk, you'd like to see maybe some other style that's not so square or rectangular, I should say.
Well, I'm not insistent on that. If the selection is limited, and as was mentioned, perhaps there could be some color variation or something to give some interest in it. My concern would be, mostly is like, okay, this is the planters are the look that we're going after on Capitola, and so we should pay attention to what those planters look like, because they might be all over the place. But the notion of just a blank side might be okay. Let's not focus on that. Let's focus on other things in the parklet. So on the outdoor dining establishment.
Thank you.
You gotta help me, Susan. What do we call these?
Outdoor dining, street dining deck.
Street dining decks.
I also heard that like to see some type of separation between the sidewalk to protect the diners.
Yes. Or a barrier.
What's that?
Well, I don't know if it was separation, but it would be like, some sort of barrier, like, I don't know, maybe a curb cut or not a curb cut, but something.
Well,
something that prevents the sidewalk from being interfered with, so the pedestrians have a good right of way.
We could use the railing that's shown in the slide that's on right now. That railing could be, used and anchored to the platform on, three sides, and have a generous opening to get in wherever, the restaurant deems they want to let people entry. So yeah, I think that's a really good addition, and that's fairly easy to implement.
I would just point out though that, I've been a lot of places, now that we've designed these, it's on our minds everywhere we go. We look at the different details that different cities are implementing. And I really haven't seen any that have a barrier between the sidewalk and the dining area.
That's true.
Well, I would
Yeah.
disagree because I've seen several. I can send you some photographs.
Sure, yeah. I was just pointing that out that, I was in New York recently and then other places, and I didn't notice that. So,
Well, pulling the string on that a little bit, I was just wondering, could there actually be an ordinance that says, okay, the tables that are closest to the sidewalk have to be anchored and they have to be X number of feet away from the sidewalk so that dining creep wouldn't occur. I mean,
Maybe-
there might be more than one way to solve the problem.
Might be easier to put up the barrier,
It probably would be easier.
and they can have a wide opening space to
Mhm.
get in. It's just to, protect everybody, particularly in areas like the Esplanade that gets so crowded, on the weekends with strollers and dogs and people and line to go to Pizza My Heart. I think we have to sort of establish territory.
As a diner, I would prefer some separation if I'm sitting at a table next to a sidewalk.
Yeah, I would too.
Okay.
Jennifer, could you bring up the other railing types? I'd like to get some feedback on, are there any of these railings that are shown that you don't support, or would you like us to bring back other designs?
Personally, I think the railing could be dependent on the restaurant. Let that be a design choice of the applicant.
I think the top picture is too solid. I think
I
there needs
agree.
to be more of a view through it. I want to be able to see that car coming at me so I can jump out of the way.
It must be getting late. I think we're getting punchy.
I think we've been punchy.
I have one more question though. While I have you. Any other comments on railings before we?
I actually, on second thought, agree with the Commissioner Ruth that you're right. It should be more of an open railing. So it shouldn't be completely up to the applicant.
So for me, if they want to, and I've seen this in place, if they want to continue the planters on around, that would be another option. It's probably a lot more expensive, and so most of the restaurants wouldn't do that, but I could give them that option if they wanted it.
I mean, with no spaces, Susan?
Or with the spaces, like they're gonna have the planters with the various types of railing in between it, the same way they're gonna do on the front. They could, carry that around if they wanted to.
Okay.
And then
Katie.
should the decking be consistent and match throughout? We've built in a few options. Definitely heard support for keeping it level with the sidewalk, but do you want them to have options in decking or just require one type of decking?
I would prefer one type.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a strong opinion one way or the other on the decking. Most of it's going to be covered up with tables and chairs and diners, so I'm sort of open on the decking question.
I agree. Either the pavers or the wood seems like two great options.
So the question is, do you want something consistent or do you want to have multiple options? And so you prefer multiple options?
Yeah. Or at least the two options.
Two options.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
I think
Katie,
that's
Okay. Phew. We got a little input and a little discussion on parklets. So we'll move then on to
Dining decks.
dining decks. Gosh darn it. I'll get it right. Number 5, director's report.
There's no director's report this evening. We do have our special meeting coming up on April 21st at 5 p.m. for our continuance on SB9 and objective design standards.
Okay, any commission communications? Item number 6, final commission communications. Seeing none, I will just mention that, as Katie pointed out, our next meeting is April 21st at 5 o'clock, and this meeting is adjourned.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Good night.